Alex Volkanovski just defended his title again with a beautiful masterclass performance in his win against Diego Lopez. And I think it's finally time to ask the question I see a lot of MMA fans trying to avoid. Where does Alex Volkanovski actually rank all time? Because at this point, we're not talking about just being the featherweight GOAT anymore. We're talking about being one of the most consistent, dominant champions the UFC has ever seen, regardless of weight class. With many multiple title defenses, not one, not two, but 3 wins over a prime Max Holloway, facing the most elite competition year after year, and now defeating a young, very hungry, extremely dangerous top contender back-to-back in such lopsided fashion, Volk has definitely had one of the greatest careers of all time. Now, when you put that all together, here's where it gets interesting, because as impressive as Volk's resume is, the all-time list is stacked with fighters like John Jones, GSP, Anderson Silva, and Demetrious Johnson, just to name a few. So the real question isn't how great Volk is, but where does he stack up and compare to other all-time UFC GOATs? Is Volkanovski a top 10 fighter ever? Does he have a case to put himself in the top 5? Or is there another reason he's not as mentioned as the other fighters are, and he's actually not at that level at all? Yes, we're going to factor in everything from his key victories to his bad losses, and by the end of this video, we'll be able to place exactly where Volk ranks all time, and where he ends up might actually surprise you. Let's break it down. To even talk about Alex Volkanovski in an all-time conversation, you have to first start with consistency. Volk didn't just win the belt and defend it only once or twice, but he ruled the entire division. Featherweight has been known to be one of the deepest divisions in the UFC for years, and Volk's beat pretty much everyone they put in front of him. Max Holloway. He has the BMF belt for a reason, one of the most skilled fighters we've ever seen, and yet he still had no answer in his prime for Volk, going 0 for 3 in all their fights, where in any other era, he would be a long reigning champion. Unanimous decisions over prime Brian Ortega and Jose Aldo dominated him. The Korean Zombie, Yair Rodriguez, and Chad Mendes, all very elite fighters, and yet Volk was able to finish them all. There wasn't ever a weak era, and none of these matchups were ever as easy as Volk made them look out to be. He beat strikers, grapplers, pressure high-volume fighters, and guys who thrive in chaos. And what separates Volkanovski from a lot of these other champions is how he won. He didn't rely on his size, he didn't rely on his athleticism alone, but he won with his outstanding fighting IQ, years of preparation, constant adjustments, and his strong discipline. All of those things matter when we're talking about all-time greatness, because dominance isn't just about going out there and getting a finish, but it's about how you go out there and take control in situations, how you're able to exploit your opponent's weaknesses, how you're able to make adjustments when things aren't going your way to flip the fight in your favor, and maybe, most important of all, is about consistency. Constantly competing at the highest level, no matter what obstacles you face, plays a big factor in how people perceive you when they compare you to other all-time greats. Now, this is where the real debate starts. And before anyone says it, yes, we're going to have to talk about the losses to Islam Makhachev, because anytime Volkanovski's name comes up in all-time debates, that's the first thing people are going to mention. And that's why context matters here. Volk moved up a weight class to fight the most dangerous and dominant lightweight on the planet. Not once, but twice. I know everyone's going to remember the knockout in that second fight, but it was on very short notice with no camp at all. Against a significantly larger and younger champion, I think it's more important to look at how the first fight played out. With a fully prepared Volk, it wasn't a blowout, but it was a very competitive, technical battle that went all 5 rounds, going the distance against the greatest lightweight we have ever seen. He didn't lose because he got exposed at featherweight. He didn't lose them because he wasn't good enough. He lost because he took a risk that majority of champions never take, moving up in weight to challenge another dominant champion while he's in his prime. And I feel like that's important to consider when having these conversations, because greatness isn't just about protecting and padding your record. It's all about who and when you're willing to fight anyone, no matter what the circumstances are, to prove that you truly are the best. So if you're using those losses to discredit his all-time rankings, I think you're missing the bigger picture. So before I place Volkanovski anywhere on the all-time list, I want to be clear how I judge greatness, because if we're being honest, everyone's GOAT list is different. It all depends on what you value. And for me, greatness isn't just about being flashy or how many knockouts you have. And it isn't about protecting a perfect record. First thing that I look at is title defenses. How long have you been the best in the world? Not just for 1 or 2 fights, but for years. Second is strength of opposition. Who did you beat? Were they champions before? Were they top contenders? Or were they just a favorable matchup for you and your style? Third is longevity at the top. Could you adapt as the division evolved? Can you stay one step ahead of everyone as they're studying and doing everything they can to beat you? And fourth is the difficulty of era you were in. Some fighters get the benefit to become champion from a shallow division with little to no top contenders, while others ruled no matter how stacked the division was, where every fight they took was dangerous. And finally, the willingness to fight anyone no matter the circumstances. Did you take risk? Did you move up? Were you always fighting the top contender? Or did you just do everything you could to protect the belt as long as possible? When you judge fighters using those criteria, not emotion, not nostalgia, or any of that, certain names start to separate themselves. And that's why this next part matters, because when you compare Volkanovski to some of the greatest fighters ever using those standards, his placement just might surprise you. Because when we break down all-time lists, I like to use different level of tiers when comparing the best fighters of all time. First, at the very top, we have the untouchable tier. The elite of the elite in every aspect of the game. Not just specialists in one area, but fighters who can take you to deep waters in all phases of the fight. Ones who you knew were going to win the fight no matter who they face. Starting with no other than John Jones, GSP, Demetrious Johnson, and this one could be controversial to some, but I have Islam Makhachev in there. Right below that is GOAT tier, while I have fighters like Anderson Silva, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and Daniel Cormier. Then in the last section of all-time greats, while these fighters are still some of the best of their generation, we have Hall of Fame tier, where we find fighters like Kamaru Usman, Jose Aldo, Israel Adesanya, Max Holloway, and Charles Oliveira. Now, when we look at where to place Volk at in these tiers of all-time great fighters, where does he fall in the rankings? I do believe his accolades and resume itself is able to put him ahead of all the great fighters in the Hall of Fame tier. So let's see where he starts to stack up against other GOAT-level fighters, because while fighters like Khabib was dominant, there's no argument about that. His title reign was short, he didn't hold the belt for years, he wasn't nearly as active as Volk, and while he does have impressive wins for sure, he didn't fight the same volume of elite contenders time after time for as long as Volk has. Volk has stayed at the top longer, beat more styles, and had more title defenses. So for that reason, I do put him over Khabib in the all-time list. Daniel Cormier was absolutely incredible. Champion in 2 divisions, all-time great Olympic wrestler, as tough as they come. But DC started MMA kind of late in his career, not even getting into the UFC until he was already 34 years old, which is crazy to think about with all the success he was able to have. I'm sure if he focused on MMA earlier in his career, it would be a different story. But one thing DC's resume is heavily tied to is his rivalry with John Jones. Even though they had great fights, it's hard to put him with those losses over someone like Volk, who was clearly the best in his division for years without anyone having a real claim over him. Even with how controversial it is, when you take a look at Anderson Silva, who's had one of the most iconic runs in UFC history and some of the most legendary highlights, when you break it down by criteria, I do believe Volkanovski has had more elite title defenses in a very deep and talented division. We've seen him bounce back after losing the title before. Even with how great Silva was, he never was the same after that loss to Chris Weidman. So I would say, as of right now, Volk has passed Silva on the all-times list. So when you weigh in dominance, longevity, strength of opponent, and difficulty of the era, including risk factors, Volkanovski checks the boxes more than any of them. So for those reasons, I do believe Volkanovski has cracked the top 5 greatest fighters of all time, putting him right at the top of the GOAT tier fighters, almost in that untouchable Mount Rushmore tier. And with claims that he's willing to challenge and go up again, and with there being plenty of more dangerous contenders coming up, and you know Volk is willing to take on all challenges, which I do believe with a couple more title defenses, if he's able to pull it off, we could see him take a place of one of those fighters on the Mount Rushmore. That's where I currently have Volk ranked all time. But where do you rank him? Do you also have him in the top 5 or top 10? Do you have him completely ranked outside of that? Wherever you have him, let me know in the comments down below. And you can let me know about what you think of my rankings as well. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more UFC content videos like these. I'll catch you guys on the next one.